Hey Laura, how you doing?
Hi, Jordan. I'm really good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good.
Really stoked for today's podcast episode. So we have somebody from an amazing organization called Hopelab. Really interesting, very varied experience, both of the person and what they bring to the conversation, but also the work that the Hope Lab is doing is really, really interesting. It's kind of looking at mental health and well-being of young people, LGBTQ plus rights, peer sort of young people supporting other young people. All
All
sorts
all
of
the
really
good
interesting
all the
things.
good things. All the good things, right? All the
It is,
good
and
things
it
for
is a
kids,
really
yeah.
positive conversation.
Yeah. Well, let's start it. Well, as you all know, we always ask our guests to introduce themselves, so I will turn to our guest this week, Jaspal Sandhu, and ask you, will you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
Happy to do that, Jordan. Thank you, Jordan and Laura, for having me on the podcast. I'm excited to be here. I am Jaspal Sandhu. I'm Executive Vice President at Hopelab. We are a social innovation lab and impact investor working to support the mental health and well-being of young people with a big focus on equity. That means that we're focused on LGBTQ plus youth and youth of color here in the United States. Um, I should mention that I'm new to youth mental health. I'm going on just over a year at Hope Lab. My own background is a mishmash of human centered design, entrepreneurship, and health equity for the 12 years before coming to Hope Lab as managing partner at a design firm that I co founded, did work in social impacts in Africa, Asia, and the United States. I've been teaching um, design and innovation courses at UC Berkeley School of Public Health for about that same period of time, and my roots are in. Few people know this. My roots are in mechanical engineering. So I actually, if you go far enough back, I used to design welds, but I don't do that anymore.
Wait,
Got harder
wells
problems.
like to get water from?
No, also good. I do know people who have designed those, but welds,
Well,
WELDS.
Oh,
As a had some work where I was doing kind of safety analysis of welds in like nuclear reactor experiments. It sounds way fancier than it was. The experiment was fancy. My role was not fancy.
what an interesting background you have, Jaspal. Really, really fascinating. And I guess has all brought you to this point now. I'd like to dig in a little bit about what Hope Lab is specifically. I believe it's an initiative led by Cornell. Is that correct?
No, but that's great. I love that we do interface with Cornell though, so that's okay. And I love hearing Cornell's name. So we're now a 20-year-old organization. We're a nonprofit that was founded by Pam Omidyar to really look at the positive possibility of technology for young people uh, with a strong bend towards science and evidence. So I'm going to tell you a short story about some of the work that happened at Hope Lab 20 years ago, well before my
Great.
time, probably concurrent when I was doing the stuff with welds. Um, so, one of the first products that Hope Lab developed was called Remission. It was a video game for um, children with cancer, and it was intended to help them kind of both understand their own journey and also develop a much better sense of agency around their care and their treatment. And that was a video game that was really crafted in partnership with young people and and was tested in a randomized control trial. Kind of looked at the evidence specifically around adherence to treatment. Basically, don't ask me any of the technical details of this randomized control trial, but basically what we saw was that there was um, pretty significant positive impact on things like adherence and agency among the kids that played this versus got some standard package
Amazing.
of education. So fast forward 20 years, 20 years is a long time for an organization. We've kind of gone through a few different phases of transformation over that time. But there's some ingredients that have kind of been there from the very beginning that we still find very much in I guess, our DNA. I'm going to mix
Yeah.
metaphors here a little bit. Um, One of those is a belief that technology is not neutral, and that as much as we can talk about harms, and we think a lot about the harms of technology, that there is um, a broad set of positive possibilities around technology. So that's one. Um, Another is we need young people at the table if
Yeah.
we're going to be. I know that's something that you both believe in a lot, which is why I'm excited to be here with you. Um, we need young people at the table, and what we're starting to do at Hope Lab is bring young people to the table in different ways. But young people as part of solution making has been part of that fabric. Now mix three metaphors for you: fabric, ingredient, and DNA. Um, and the last is a firm belief in science. So,
Yeah.
whether that is rigorously testing the impact of products and interventions, or whether that's actually generating new research for the field, or whether that's actually relying on research in order to guide our strategy and what we do. Those are all things that have been common to Hope Lab since the beginning. Now, the bits that are a little bit different today are that we're squarely focused on youth mental health and well-being. Sort of been there from the beginning, but now it's a lot more explicit for us. Second, as I mentioned at the top, we are very centered on equity, and so looking at youth of color and LGBTQ plus youth, it's kind of our guiding star is new, and making it explicit. I think was really important. Those are it's a change that's happened over the last couple of years. And in terms of how we work, one pretty big shift from the days of remission and even stuff that we were doing 3 and 4 years ago is that we don't make our own products anymore. We did that 3 or 4 or 5 times over the years. It's hard to do. When you do it, usually, you've got a whole company around one product, and we were in a model where we were trying to spin out multiple products. And we recognized as an organization that that wasn't the right way for us to have the right kind of impact that we wanted. So now everything that we do is through partnership. And I've been thinking about it this past week that really our work, I haven't run this by our communications team, but it's okay. Our work is really accelerating the work of innovators out there in the world. And we do that a few different ways, but that's really, I think, maybe I'm testing this out with you two in the audience, but I think that's really what we're doing, because we've got fairly new for us and sort of unique for the field is, even though we're set up the way that we are, we have a venture fund that invests in early stage companies in the space that are doing work that we believe in, that has alignment with our equity mission. We have Hope Lab Studio, and that is it's a little bit like my company from the before times, Gobi, except it's internal to Hope Lab. And unlike Gobi, we don't charge for services. So we are offering human-centered design, user experience, consulting, in addition to equity consulting and research and impact modeling consulting to organizations out there in the world that we think are doing good work. And we do it pro bono. And then we've got some activities in the research space to translate science from academia to the real world. So that all of that is really finding really good people out there who've already figured out a lot of this,
Yeah.
and finding ways that we can support them.
Cool.
I feel like you You hinted at something we were going to ask you about, which is the Responsible Technology Youth Power Fund. It
Hmm.
seems like you were hinting at it. Can you tell us about it? Why it matters? What
Yeah.
it does? What it means?
Yeah, so this has been a lot of fun. It's like I mentioned, I've been here for at Hope Lab for a year, and this was uh, I think day four. I got introduced to a couple of colleagues, um, two organizations. Emma Lycan and Andrew Brennan from the Omidyar Network, and Kevin Connors from the Susan Crown Exchange. So we're three in this. Hope Lab's a funny beast because you look at us different ways. We can look like an investor. We can look like a sometimes like a think tank. We can look like a product studio. But in this framework, we're looking like a funder. And both these organizations had already come together to start to think about how we could support young leaders in the responsible technology movement. And yeah, how to define responsible technology. It's tough because, we, whenever we tried to define the thing, it ended up being like a two-page document. This is the way I see it is technology. Again, technology is not neutral. Evolutions in technology, not just social media, but evolutions in technology over the last decade. I say this as much as a whatever professional as I do as a father of an 11-year-old. Um, there are some risks and there are some harms with it. And there's work to be done, some work to be done in new technology platforms, perhaps some in the policy space, some in education. And responsible technology is a movement to do better, not just to reduce harms, but to really look at the again those positive possibilities of technology.
Can you be a little be a little specific? Like, what are some of those harms, and how will we start to think about positive about those positive uses?
Yeah, great question. So we're pretty recently on the heels of the Surgeon General's advisory on um, on social media and youth mental health that I know you're both
Mm-hmm.
really familiar with. That came a month after the American Psychological Association put out a similar report.
Yeah.
I think what we appreciated as Hope Lab about those reports was pointing out harms that I'll get back to the harms in a second, but that also recognize that it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, I'm going to flip it back for a second. We'll go back to harms.
Yeah.
We've done a series of national surveys in partnership with Common Sense Media. And when we look again, we've got that really strong equity focus at Hope Lab. When we looked at um, LGBTQ plus youth, we found that they were using social media. I should have the number somewhere. It's like something crazy, like 98% of them were using it to seek out mental health supports. Like they're using it for
Mm-hmm.
these really positive and supportive, like in support of their own response and resilience to a pretty
Yeah.
challenging um, political and social and cultural environment. In addition to being
Absolutely.
adolescents, it's already hard
Yeah.
enough to be an adolescent in this world. So I do want to emphasize that there is a lot of good and there's a lot of potential there. And that's like kind of as we think about responsible technology, there's a big piece of it that it's like what's working and how can we do even more with that. Harms is complex. I think both those reports, APA and Surgeon General, um, pointed out something that we believe in too is that there's, and I hate to say this because this is how every BBC article about research ends, is that more research needs to be done, but it
Correct.
really is true. It really is
I mean, that
true.
is kind of the point of research, that you just keep doing it,
It it is.
Yeah.
It is.
That's how
Yeah.
you make your living, Jordan.
right?
I think it's easy for us to take a look at. You can pick any chart. You can look at anxiety. You can look at depression. You can look at loneliness. You can look at. I'll keep it there. We know that I can keep talking about statistics that are going to get way, way more intense than those. Um, and they look like they map to the rise of social media um, and maybe smartphone penetration.
Yeah.
But there's other stuff that's been happening in the world. Um, some of that independent of social media, some perhaps not,
Hmm.
right? And so things like climate stress,
Yeah.
shifts in the economy, um, racism, and just like anti-LGBTQ plus, not just legislation, but sort of like, I don't know what I mean. It's hate, right? So
Yeah.
like all of these things, um, and there's a longer list, have also been rising over that same period of time. And we're just trying to be thoughtful about where we can actually attribute that to the technology, and where we can't. And that's I'm not trying to be an apologist um, for social media or big technology platforms. It's really this that we're trying to step into this with kind of that foundation that we have in science and
I find that really reassuring. So, Jordan and I, a couple of things. One is, we did our first series of the podcast during the pandemic. So, we would sort of documenting as we were recording our episodes how the world was changing, even in those sort of specific conversations we were having. So, absolutely agree with everything that you're saying. And whilst we're not scared of talking about the challenges with online spaces, I think it's really important that we do name them and call them out. But actually, we always do try to put a kind of some positivity around it, whether it be suggestions for solutions or as you say, areas that we know need further research, and encouraging people to go look into those. And to your point, you can pretty much find correlation anywhere if you look hard enough. We cannot blame these things, and it's definitely we see wonderful examples of on Roblox of how much like the video game that you mentioned for the kids with cancer, we see those sorts of things happening where young people are creating these experiences for themselves and for their community that are really, really therapeutic for them, and safe spaces where they feel that they belong. And they're much better positioned to design those things than we are. So, giving them the opportunity and the skills and the tools that they need to do, that's great. And so I wanted to flag something that I'm kind of really passionate about, which is the IME app that I know that is a Hopelab sort of supported initiative, and we've seen others like the Coco Mental Health, and there are other kind of, as you say, this is about kind of young people having these safe places to go online where they can ask the questions that they might not be able to ask in the real world, or that they feel nervous talking about. Can you share a little bit about IME in particular?
absolutely, I'd love to do that. And first, I'm going to comment on Roblox as again a parent of a Roblox user. Um, what what I love about what you just said, Laura, is that there's something in that creator space that's very much about young people having agency.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to step. I know you know this, and this is not it's not a paid advertisement for Roblox, but it's um, the ability to actually be a creator is very much the power of that platform and others out there. And so when we think about, I know I keep defaulting to the positive. Sorry, I'm so optimistic this morning, but
I
it's
love that.
y'all need to catch me at nighttime, and then we can do the B side of this podcast.
Part
But
two coming up.
there's yeah, there's I think that's one of those principles that we need to be looking for. Not maybe not in every single solution or application, but that's something that we we know works, and it's something that we can maybe try to lean on a bit more. So IME, I know we didn't even finish talking about responsible technology. We can come back to that later. So IME.guide is the website. This is in just at the tail end of our previous model when Hopelab was still building products. We built them. We still didn't build them alone. We built this, and especially in partnership with the It Gets Better project and Centerlink, which is the center of LGBTQ centers across the U.S. We had this seed of an idea that we wanted to provide a platform for LGBTQ young people, including questioning young people, that could help to affirm their identities. Kind of it's more than one thing in a single package, but we we recognized that there was an open space for there to be a resource like this, that it would actually serve a need. And kind of building off our mission, we had seen some interesting possibilities with chatbots. And in the spirit of us having a human-centered design capability inside the group and a belief that young people should be partners in design, um, our team went out to all these different places, not just California and New York, but we were working with centers in Kentucky and Alabama and Alaska. And so Alaska was interesting because our team went up there, and the, the chatbot thing was panned. They said, this is not it. This is not for us. This is not what we need. And it was not the only time that we received that feedback, but we heard it loud and clear and kind of shifted the design of what it would be. And what it has become is a platform that we still are in partnership again with Centerlink, and it gets better, are providing support for that safely and in a lightweight way helps people figure out a bit more about their identities. So, there's a mix of things on there that are focused on like learning. So you learn about intersectionality, but there's also community stories where you can actually hear from young people. Young people ended up being a lot of the content creators, both in terms of like short videos and in terms of the artwork that you find there. And then there's these various activities that are focused on, I was playing around with one myself last week, even though I'm not the target audience, on how stress manifests in our bodies. And just like some of the stuff we've done before, we tested it out. Not just product tested, we actually did a study on it to see, like, does this work in a kind of A versus B environment. We saw a lot of great outcomes in looking at IME versus kind of, again, just sort of like general information about what it's like to be an LGBTQ plus young person. And seeing that evidence gave us the confidence to really push forward and push this out into the world. In the context of the young people and engaging the young people in this work, two things stand out to me. One is that they told us we were wrong, saved us a ton of time because we could have gone down the wrong path building the wrong thing, and they really helped right the ship. And the other is what one of the young people said to our team is, no one ever comes to Alaska for us. And I think that was a reminder that we need to do more of that. It's very easy. We're a San Francisco-based organization. We have a somewhat distributed team, but, our team's in places like Chicago, New York, and
Yeah.
Seattle. And those are also important places, but it's also, I grew up in Arizona. It's a state that people don't think about a lot. It's a big country, and we want to make sure that we're engaging young people from lots of different places.
I want to ask a question about, you've said a few different times you've talked about technology not being neutral today. You keep using that word design, and I know you said you had a design firm, and I know you've been involved.
I sense a hard question coming up, Jordan.
No, it's not necessarily hard. But I know I know you've been involved in the Design for Health initiative, and I think to sort of help everybody understand what all the things we're talking about, like what does it even mean to do something like Design for Health? I think this starts to get to the responsible technology question too. Like we don't often think in terms of, like, the mainstream way of thinking, at least, is not about an intersection between design and health.
So great question. I spent at this point, I spent like 20 years in this space, and I think the longer I'm in it, the more I think it feels like us putting fancy labels on something that's a very simple concept. And that is, if you're going to build something, if you're going to build a product, if you're going to make a policy, if you are going to be creating some kind of service out in the world, whoever that's for, you just got to engage them in the process. That's like if I had to write down what human-centered design or design is on the back of a postage stamp, that's it. It's it sounds common sense. It's how actually most small scale entrepreneurs across the world do their business, no matter what it is. If you're, you know, if you want to be, I'm not going to use hot dogs. Let's talk about, do you know what golgappe are or pani puri?
No, nope. You're gonna have to explain that now.
Okay. All
Now we
right.
need a whole
Great.
other explanation.
So they're little, I don't know if I have any at home. I shouldn't. They're like little fried globes of dough, but they're like, just imagine like a three-dimensional potato chip.
Amazing.
And I feel like this is going to be cut from the podcast. This is not related to the digital future. So you get these, you get a whole stack of them. You pop a hole in the top with your finger, and you dip it in a like a spiced water, and then you also like jam some potatoes, fresh onions in there, and you eat them one at a time. Indian snack, you can get them. I know you can get them in London. You can get them out here in California, but of course you get them all over India. If
That's
you were going to be
awesome.
starting a Golgappa cart somewhere, you wouldn't just post up at some random place and just hope that people would come to you. Like a good entrepreneur is going to sort of do a little bit of fact finding. They're going to talk to potential customers. They're going to test out the recipe with customers. They are everything related to like marketing, branding, pricing. Like you're going to be engaging with the community who is going to be driving you the revenue to you and come back to eat these things and be your best ambassadors to the world. Um, but there's something kind of magical that happens in organizations, and it's not the good magic. It's when organizations get bigger. You know, we've worked before I came to Hopelab. I worked with a few medical device companies as an example. Um, it's really easy to design a product for somebody, whether it's a clinician or whether it's an at-home use product, and not talk to clinicians, not talk to the people that use the product. Um, and so actually talking to them, listening, testing things out with them, that's all that human-centered design is. And design in the health space is doing exactly that, and making sure that we don't forget that the people, these are not physicians, not nurses, not care teams, not doulas and midwives, not just doulas and midwives, um, but that the rest of the world also is a really important set of users. And so when we talk about the responsible technology youth power fund, for us, it's kind of handing over the keys to the young people. That's really what it's about. I mean, we set up this fund, um, in partnership with the Midiar Network and the Susan Crown Exchange, and we were able to bring in 11 other funders into this mix, which is, I tell you, it's not always an easy thing to do. Um, all of us do really quite different things. We're showing up to this effort together for our own reasons, but we had this common interest in, okay, well, we know that there's lots happening in the technology space. We know that there is something that needs to be done, or many things that need to be done. Again, policy, education, new technology development, even one group that's a publication for technologists, young technologists. Um, but we all wanted to maybe talk the talk a little bit more. We all talk about wanting to support young people, but to actually push funds to an organization that's run by a 22-year-old or 19-year-old is something that doesn't happen that often.
Yeah.
And I can go into the history of why that is, but I think I'm sure you've seen that as well. And so that's what we're trying to do. Not recklessly ourselves. We know there's really great innovators out there. It's, they've got a different vantage point. They've grown up through a different era than somebody who's 10 years or 20 years older. It doesn't mean that we exclude people who are older in general from solution making. It's just that we've
But you see the
intentionally or
benefit of
unintentionally.
right. There's multiple groups, multiple perspectives. Why favor one over the other?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Stakeholders come in every flavor, if you like.
Hmm.
You know, and I think when your business, as you say, when your business is health, we need to talk to everybody who's going to be impacted by that. And that leads me, unfortunately, Jaspal, to our last question.
Oh no.
Um,
Okay.
so this is going to be quite an interesting one, I think. So I'm asking you,
Yeah.
have a think about, and again, it's those sort of different stakeholders. So the big decision makers, whether it be government policymakers or the tech industry, what three things would you ask them to think about? What's your big, you know, if you could just go, right, these guys, these are the three main priorities, what would they be?
Wow. That's a great question. This is where I'll ask you to edit out 3 minutes of silence as I think through such a big question. Um, okay. I got one so far. Uh,
Let's start there.
I got two. Let's start with two, and I'll see if I can come up with a good third one. It's a lot of pressure to come up with. We can come up with lots, but to sort of elevate them all to the top three is that's
That's
where the
fine. You
hard
can
part
change your
comes
mind
in.
afterwards, but
Okay.
top of
All
mind
right.
today.
We can change the question to be name a few.
All right. That's great. So I'm, I think we talk a lot about policy. I'm going to kind of have a US focus here, but we see this actually in other places as well. When we talk about policy and technology platforms in the United States, it's playing out two different ways, right? We've got sort of federal level policy and stuff maybe happening there. And then you've got state level policies like the um, California Age Appropriate Design Code, like the stuff that's been happening around potential bans of TikTok in places like Montana. Um, without going into each of those policies, I think there's perhaps a missing piece, which is we focus on big P policy and not enough on, I don't know if it's a little p, a different P policy, and that's the power that technology platforms have themselves, um, either as individual massive platforms or together as an industry or sub industry to make changes. And I think there's, of course, that's being done, but I actually think that that is the place where there is such power and such potential impact. It's, if we take it to a different industry, it's like if Walmart makes small changes to some level of packaging in produce, because of the scale that they operate at, that's going to have a huge, you know, impact in some direction
Yeah.
on use and waste. And in the same way, platforms are touching so many young people, and not just touching. I mean, this is like when I think about young people, I think about, for us at Hopelab, that means roughly 13 to 25-year-olds. That's not even the full period of adolescence. There's helpful. I went to a presentation that Andrew Fellini from the Center for Developing Adolescents at UCLA did recently for us at Hopelab. And there's a whole period of adolescence that my daughter is in right now that kind of comes before 13, right? So that's also a really important period. But if we just look at the 13 to 25 um, that we're focused on, I think about where we're going to meet these young people. Like, where are they spending their time? And where they spend their time, this is a very simple model here, is they're sleeping, not enough. They're online and they're at school. They're in a few other places, but those are three really important places for us to focus on. We don't do a lot in sleep at the moment. Um, but young people spend so much time concurrently in different digital spaces. There's multiple touch points with current platforms. Those, I'll say this again as a dad, like even where they're spending their time changes. Like 3 months ago, my daughter was using completely different tech than she is now. I should have the answers, right? I work in this space. I
Uh-huh.
should read your books, Jordan, is what I should do. But I don't. Like, people ask me all the time, it's like, what do you do with your daughter? It's like, I don't know, we're figuring it out. These are really hard questions. So that's one, is sort of looking to industry for some of the answers. We can offer our kind of counsel and support, and would be happy to do that if it was welcome. But I think there's actually, if we think about the impact and the change that's going to happen, I think that's one perhaps underappreciated space, and I'm excited to see what's going to come and continue to come out of that. I think, not to disregard federal and state legislation, that will continue to happen, but
Yeah.
that's an area I'm excited about. A second is figuring out ways to put young people in real positions of power. Yes.
Here.
If there's not a video clip of that, Laura gave 2 thumbs up on the video part of this podcast. We've got somebody, I apologize, I don't remember her name, but somebody on our state board of education in California who's just turned 18. And when they announced her, they announced all the members of the board, and they would say at the end, this person is a registered Republican, this person's a registered independent. Under hers, it said this person is not registered to vote. I thought that was great. It's, I think it's the logical next step. It's not happening enough. And I was we co-hosted a meeting recently with the Arthur Blank Foundation, which also does a lot of work in mental health and well-being here in the US, in Montana. And it was to bring together funders with young leaders in the youth mental health space, with the idea that we're trying to make more of this happen, that we're trying again to not hand over the keys and walk away, but hand over the keys and jump into the back seat for the ride with these young people. And this idea came up about changing the power structure. Like, what would it look like if young people, really young people, adolescents, were at the table making decisions about where tens or hundreds or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars are going to flow? I think that could have a major impact. What would it mean if we had an under 18 on every single school board in America? Yeah. I don't know what those discussions would look like, but I do believe that we would have a better technology future.
I'm currently at one of the largest ed tech conferences in the US. This is a really good topic that I might just go and raise with all of these governors and school board people that are here.
Do it. Please do it. If you could solve that before you fly home, that would be fantastic.
I mean, I agree with all of you, and I hate to be a pessimist, but like we're still just trying to get women, people of color, LGBTQ adults in positions of power.
Yeah. My response to that is we are, and we got to push on all fronts. And, when we talk about young people, we're talking about young women, and we're talking about, young non-binary people. We're talking about young people of color. We're talking about, young LGBTQ folks. And I agree. We have a lot of work to do, but I don't know about you all. I'm in this line of work because I believe that we can do it.
Yeah.
If I didn't, I would,
We're certainly
there's
not
hard
in it
days
for
for
money, because we all know you don't pay teachers or the people who care for the kids in this world.
I'm married to a teacher. I can tell you that for sure.
I'm going to summarize what you said from, certainly what my takeaway is. We all need to do more. And that's, I think, the simplest way is we're seeing these really positive steps. We're seeing things starting to happen, but we need to do more. We need to keep pushing. We need to keep going. And whether that's, as you say, from government policy people, through the tech industry, through the education system, and just being good adults, good role models, good parents, and encourage that next generation.
Yeah. Could I add one last thought that you sparked for me?
I was about to say, anything you want to add before we?
Maybe I'll take the privilege to say 2. I haven't thought of the second one yet, but something else that came up in this meeting that I was just at in Montana, and I've heard it a couple of other times, is this idea. First, I heard it being called reverse mentorship, and now I'm hearing it be called co-mentorship. And this is new to me, but I love it. It's just the idea that we do have a role to play as adults and as mentors, and that's something that I've done. I'm sure both of you have been doing for a long time. But to actually set up a relationship where that mentorship flows in both directions between me, a not young, a middle-aged person, and a young person, is something that part of this goes back to the, giving young people some more power, but some of it is just learning. And that's actually something, this is not an ask of the listeners. I've got a couple of people on my list that I've been talking to, but I'm seeking out my co-mentor for the year. Hopefully somebody that I can provide some help and support to, but somebody that I know I could clearly benefit in learning from.
Yeah, I'm seeing a real movement in that area too. I took part in a project last year with the Headstream
Yeah,
group,
we
and
know
yeah,
Headstream.
so
We
that
love
was
them.
yeah, wonderful. And so they did the same thing where they kind of matched us with these amazing young people, and I'm still in touch with a couple of them, and they've been helping us with some of our Roblox kind of workshops and projects that we've been working on. And there's a similar movement within UNICEF. There's an amazing project which we've just launched called Game Changers, which is about getting young women into STEM and STEAM subjects, and ideally into the video games industry. And so they are going to be matching us with young movers and shakers from all over the world so that we can really get that mentorship and help to lead. That we need to, we really need to listen to them and hear what they have to say, and they can show us the way, because ultimately they're going to be the future, and I'll be retired.
That's fantastic. The model, as well as you being retired, both of those are.
Well, Jaspal, thank you so much. It's been really a thought-provoking conversation. Anything you want to ask us?
Yeah, I would love to flip that big question that Laura asked me back on you two. You maybe just like the one thing. If you've got the magic wand or the magic gavel, what's one thing that you would like either government or large technology platforms, or you can even say large funders, but I think government's the largest funder out there. Like, what would you want them to do in this space of youth mental health, and you can call it technology or social media?
Laura, you want to take that first so I have time to think about it? Because I don't
Yeah,
even
no,
know.
I mean, mine is really simple. I've had some heartbreaking conversations over the last couple of months with friends who work in civil society, particularly around these topics, and they're just losing their funding and they're having to close services. And, the Self-See app by Peer Health Exchange, for example, I did some advisory stuff with them. This is an amazing peer-led, mentoring app around young people and health, all aspects of health. And they don't have sufficient funding to continue providing that, and it was built by young people for young people, and those things make me really sad. So everybody has to put their money where their mouth is. If we really are committed to working in this space, it has to be long-term committed funding. It's not just something we can do for a couple of years. That's mine.
Ooh, can I just like piggyback on it? Because I like that, because as someone who has been looking at this space now for I feel like I've already gone. I'm in the third generation of hearing new ideas and new things, but I'm also watching how the big funders, the big famous foundations, while they're amazing and they make it happen, they do disappear, and like amazing groups doing amazing work just end up disappearing that should still be doing it, because there's just no consistency when you have a model that depends on philanthropy so huge. I don't even know what's the right word I'm looking for. So completely.
There we go. See, we're so well aligned, Jordan. He's from a pod.
A podcast. Well, thank you again, Jaspal. This has been great.
I don't know why that made my morning.
There we
Peas
go.
in a podcast.
We aim to please Jaspal.
We might change the whole name of this to Peas in a Podcast. Digital Peas in a Podcast.
I think that's amazing. What a great idea.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to continuing this conversation with you.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Jaspal.
Thanks for listening to Into the Digital Future. We hope you had as much fun listening as we had talking. For links and resources about any of the ideas, projects, or initiatives we discussed on this episode, please visit the CUNY Center website at cunycenter.org/future.
Into the Digital Future has been brought to you by Roblox and the Joan Gans CUNY Centre at Sesame Workshop. Your hosts are Jordan Shapiro and Laura Higgins. Matt Clark is our audio editor and production coordinator. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any episodes on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and more.